So let's jump into the next slide. First of all, hi everyone. Welcome to Datadog and RapDev's Democratize Security through DevSecOps webinar. I'm really excited to have you all on the call here today, and I'm excited to have our speakers dive into the content that we've prepared for you. The session is going to be about 45 minutes or so. This will include a Q&A, so please make sure to input your questions into the chat function. We'll get to this at the end of the session, but we really do want this to be interactive. The session will be recorded and then it'll be sent out after the webinar. So I would love to introduce our speakers today. We have Ryan Henrich here, Director of Security at RapDev, as well as Amber Benoist, Senior Product Manager at Datadog. So Ryan and Amber here are going to, I'll go to the next slide. They're going to discuss the state of cloud computing and security investments, the changing role of security teams, and then they're going to introduce Datadog Cloud SIEM and CSM, and we'll discuss investigating security alerts before opening it up to that Q&A. So without further ado, I will hand this over to Amber.
Thanks, Brooke. So before we jump in, I wanted to quickly give an overview of what Datadog and RapDev are respectively and how they work together. Datadog is a unified observability and security platform, and it's powered by our agent, over 700 integrations, and also shared tooling like our dashboards, our incident management, and even workflows. Our security products, they can provide really deep and actionable insights because they're built on top of our observability solutions. So Datadog has what we call the 3 pillars of observability. Starting at the infrastructure layer, we can provide visibility into both performance, reliability, as well as security context via our infrastructure monitoring and our cloud security management solutions. We also have an application performance monitoring offering. So that can look at that can collect traces as well as runtime activity from your services, such as your APIs, your front-end applications, and show you that if there is a performance issue at the application layer, if that could be leading into a security concern or an active attack. So tied together, that is very powerful, as opposed to looking at that context alone across multiple tools. And we also have a log management offering, and that, again, powered by our native integrations, we're able to aggregate logs across many of your cloud providers, so the big 3, Azure, GCP, AWS, as well as your SaaS tools that may also be creating logs, audit logs, performance logs, and put that in one place and use that to power our SIEM. As a result, this does a whole lot to power both full stack monitoring, but also give you visibility throughout the full software development lifecycle. I want to give the mic to Ryan so he can talk a little bit about how RapDev plugs in here.
Sure. And, when we think about security, I think, something really important to touch on is security ultimately is a data problem. And so when we're looking at, good platforms to build on, we want to work with folks who have the data already. And so they have the ability for us to go and build on top of that data set. So, RapDev is Datadog's Partner of the Year 3 years in a row now. We have built multiple solutions on top of Datadog. We work with the largest Datadog customers in both migrations and improvements to their environments. And we've seen more deployments at large scale than anybody else. So we spend a lot of time with our customers making sure that we properly scope projects, we understand what their goals are, and then we can go and deliver a really successful outcome in a short-term turnaround. We also have some managed services offerings that we've built on top of Datadog because it is the platform where our customers can go and bridge multiple use cases together. So we're not looking to pull in a bunch of disparate tools and try and marry that data somewhere in some data lake and ultimately have an engineering project. We're working with a partner who has built something that fundamentally can go and meet and exceed the needs of our customers.
Thanks, Ryan. So yeah, we work really closely with RapDev. On our security products, we have over 6,000 customers, a lot of familiar names here. that are using Datadog security to detect vulnerabilities, keep tabs on their compliance, and ultimately protect their modern environments from attacks. The comprehensive approach we have helps organizations stay ahead of emerging threats and a quickly evolving landscape. Almost every day, every week, you see a news article about a new type of zero-day vuln or a new type of breach. And a lot of the organizations that do use us because they want to be confident not only in the coverage they have, but also the actions they will take from what comes out of that coverage. Because ultimately they want to stay secure, not be surprised by anything that comes out from the threat landscape, and also make sure that as they do that, they can continue to innovate super quickly. So, just to double click on some of our customers, and to give you an example, every time you go to the Washington Post and you load up a news article, Datadog is behind the scenes making sure that not only is that news article loading super quickly, but also making sure that your subscriber details stay secure, that you're not going to deal with things like misinformation. And the other side goes on the FICO side. If you're checking your FICO score, Datadog is behind the scenes there, protecting probably some of the most important type of information, your financial information, and making sure that we're not just there to make sure we're delivering that data quickly, but to make sure that it can stay locked down. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. And it's one thing to say, hey, we have 6,000 customers, but it's another thing to also add on that these are the most innovative types of companies. Some of them are working on AI, some of them are securing healthcare information, some of them are making sure that as you put your credit card information in, that it's not leaving the perimeter of the systems that you're putting that information in. And there's a reason why Datadog is behind all of that. One is, we've been on the forefront for observability, making sure that we can secure these modern systems. So as companies went on their digital transformation journeys, almost 20 years ago, Datadog was there since the beginning. So, one thing that we talk about a lot is the fact that we're a cloud first product. So we have very native integrations with not just like the cloud providers, but also the new types of technologies that come out of that. Things like, and concepts like serverless and containers. Datadog has been a first class integrator with those types of technologies as they've started to diversify and increase in volume. But there's also other types of things that we are known for. So not getting in the way, right? We want to make sure developers and operations folks can move really quickly. And we've made great strides in making sure that we can be there also for the security teams, the IT teams as well. All this to say is that as there's been an explosion of complexity, we've been there not just from the observability side, but also the security side to make sure that we can provide a single pane of glass and make sure that we can support that cross-functional approach it takes to continue to stay on top of those modern environments. We can
And
go
just
to
to, well,
Go
just to take a step back and circle back on something you said, being a first class citizen of cloud native solutions is super important here for the customers that we work with on a day-to-day basis. Datadog is not a platform that had taken a traditional approach to on-prem security where we're focusing on firewall logs and switches and routing and things like that, and trying to apply that same logic to modern technology like Kubernetes or something like that. Datadog has really kind of dove in head first with the cloud technology partners and focused on pulling out the relevant data and doing security detections on that relevant data. So we're not going to get lost in sort of the explosion of network traffic that the cloud has seen. We're able to focus on hey, this is Kubernetes pod to pod communication. This matters here. And it gives us a really, really easy way for us and our customers to double click on things, understand what's going on, and ultimately drive, a more secure outcome without standing in the way of everybody.
Yeah, that's correct. There is another call out, our tagging approach. So piece of feedback we get from a lot of customers is how we contextualize. So we're plugged in, at the top level where we have visibility at like the cloud account level, the organizational level for accounts, so we can have really good coverage. But we also have this concept of both logging without limits, but also really powerful tagging that helps to contextualize the high volume of data that comes out of these complex systems. And like you said, Ryan, it's valuable to not only be able to see the tip of the iceberg, like what comes out of the security tooling, but also to be able to drill down and get to the like meat and potatoes of that all in one product. But yeah, we can go to the next slide. Thank you. And I know this like personally. So actually, before I got into product management, I was a DevOps engineer. I remembered, I was actually a developer before I was a DevOps engineer. I remembered hearing the entire like shift left story when it first started. So, I remembered hearing like, hey, if I'm moving from developer to DevOps, does this mean that now I have to do twice as much work, two different types of jobs? And it was really intimidating. It was really crazy to think that my job that was already hard enough was now going to get doubly more difficult. And figuring out how to juggle the priorities there was like a big concern of mine. When I started out as a DevOps engineer, I joined an organization that was moving to the cloud, and my main job was not only to support software engineers, but to figure out how software engineers think. We had a lot of issues trying to keep up with how quickly the software engineering teams were moving, and to support what they're doing while also balancing what the security teams needed from us. So on one hand, I had software engineers telling me that I wasn't provisioning infrastructure for them quickly enough, or I was blocking them. On the other hand, I had security teams coming to me and asking me what I was doing, like to asking me to basically block the software engineering teams from moving to specific types of technologies or new types of frameworks. And it wasn't because there was a security concern, it was because the security teams just couldn't understand what they were doing. And in order for them to make an informed decision, they needed first to like understand. And in a way, they were almost like perceived as like the gatekeepers of being able to move fast. And so, we would have things like security inquiries, compliance audits, things like that, where the security team was constantly reaching out to us looking for explanations almost retroactively of what we did something and asking us to like scale things back, which we couldn't do. Once something is in production, it's kind of like, hey, this thing is here now. You need to get with the program and like figure out a way to move forward because I need to go move on to my next priority. So it was really frustrating. It was a mix of like retroactively having to do things for security, but also getting asked from security for us, for DevOps, to fix things on infrastructure that no longer existed. So it's kind of like getting pulled in a lot of different directions. That's why this like graph or this like illustration I made resonates a lot, because it's really how it felt. It was just kind of like, how do you do everything and keep everyone happy all at once? It's like you can't. You're just like constantly moving all over the place. And DevSecOps exacerbated this because we were trying to do DevOps and DevSecOps with the old tools, the antiquated tools. Brian, anything you want to add here? Because I know you were on the security side of all this.
Yeah, I mean, look, I still remember an era where we had security change windows, and we didn't release new product. We had the keys to the firewall, so if development wanted to try something and we didn't approve it, it didn't happen. But the world has moved has moved on so far past that. We can't go back to that. It was not a good state in the first place. But I think one thing that's really important to call out here is DevOps became a role. It's a person in an organization that bridges between all of these groups that we're talking about. This kind of theory of DevSecOps here is like, I think it's really important to call out, like, this is not an individual person. We're not going to go and hire for folks who are DevSecOps people. There is not. I mean, there is no way that we can go and build companies by hiring these unicorns. It's not, DevSecOps is not a person. It's also not a product. You can't just buy Datadog and be DevSecOps. So if anybody's telling you that, like, that's not true, it's cultural, right? This is a way that the organization internally can work together. And I believe fundamentally it starts by sharing data sets. And so, it only works if you put all your data in the same place, so that the development team, the operations team, the security team, they're all reading from that same data source. They can all understand things together. And so when security reaches out and says, hey, we see this, misconfiguration on this Kubernetes cluster, they can share that back to an operations person who has access to that same data set. It's not some tool that ops person then has to go and ask for permission to get access to. And they can actually dive in and go, oh yeah, okay, that is a misconfiguration, or it isn't in this case because we have this compensating control in place, right? That is an internet-facing service. So your risk, the thing that you're worried about isn't true. We can go and suppress this out. And so fundamentally, like, again, we can't just hire people to go and do this. We have to change the way that we work together. And I believe that starts with marrying all that data together, putting it all in the same place, and allowing people to work off of the same sheet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this kind of contextualizes why, like, the previous approaches don't work. Not only are the different teams outnumbered, right? Like, I would say, I'm biased because I come from the DevOps space, but I feel like DevOps always has it the hardest because they're always in the middle trying to figure out how to keep one side moving quickly and keep everyone happy with everything that's going on. But the other thing to call out is that a lot of these different roles are using different tools. And, in my time working in the security space, I've had many conversations with security people that have come to me and said, hey, we keep going to these other teams and asking them to fix things on infrastructure that just simply doesn't exist anymore, or having a hard time keeping coverage because they can't keep up with the new types of technologies that the other teams are adopting. On the other hand, we have development teams that they have priorities to move quickly to deliver customer facing features. Not to say that security is back of mind, but it's not necessarily top of mind, right? They have to balance being able to move fast while not introducing new types of attack vectors, while making sure that we're not finding issues too late in the software development lifecycle. And again, of course, with operations right in the middle, as always. We're lucky because we have a lot of access and a lot of visibility into performance and reliability risk, but we don't always have the best prioritization context for fixing security issues. With all of this comes a ton of different tools, right? There's tools that security is just never going to have access to in the development and the operation side. And there's prioritization context that developers and operations are never going to get from security, especially in the dynamic environments of today, right? And so all this to say is that, traditional approaches just don't work. And talking about that, it means that there is like specific use cases, specific tools that all of these groups have to rally around to make sure that they can keep the needle moving forward. We can go ahead, Ryan.
No, and this is super important. So like we as security, like, we cannot wait in a modern context to scan the environment on a daily basis, or we cannot wait and just focus on production, because you touched on the last slide, like, production is the most expensive real estate in the world. It's waterfront in Malibu. It's both incredibly expensive to buy into, and it's constantly falling in the ocean. And we cannot go, as security folks, we cannot go back to our development and operations teams and tell them, like, hey, you've got this thing that's broken out here in production, or that's a huge risk to us out in production, because they're on to the next problem. B, they can't make that change at this point. It's out there, or C, it's already dead. Like that infrastructure has already moved on. So there's this, we've been talking about shift left as a marketing and vocabulary term for the better part of a decade now, with I believe no functional movement on actually doing it well. And I think it comes down to the fact that if you tell if you just tell developers like, hey, you've got to scan your code before you push it into production, but then you don't give security and operations the ability to go and help them do that and understand the context of like, hey, this critical network vulnerability is critical for these reasons. You can't have CVSS 9.8 Nginx vulnerability on our public facing service. If you don't provide that context through the whole life cycle of development, then we're not going to be successful. And I think it's one of the things that Datadog has done a really good job of by starting with the DevOps folks and now branching into security. We're giving security teams the opportunity here to go and meet their counterparts where they already live today, and we don't have to go and try and convince DevOps folks to go and adopt brand new tooling and have a new UI that they log into to get data. We can work out of the tools that they're using today, and we can integrate closely into what they're already doing.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah. And this kind of like visualizes, so like I said, everyone has different parts of the software development lifecycle as their top priority. So developers usually are at the very beginning, which makes sense, right? At the IDE level, all the way up to deploying the thing. This is a little bit linear because operations does get involved with making sure that the developers have the infrastructure to build what they're doing in the first place. So they are almost at the beginning as well, making sure that the development teams have a home to ship all of this stuff. But something that rings true is that security is almost always at the end, with getting involved in these high priority efforts, for approving them to ship them to production, but also trying to figure out how to secure them. It's almost always a retroactive activity. Part of it is just with how the DevOps teams interact with security in environments where these teams are taking siloed approaches, but also with the fact that security teams almost aren't resourced the same way that the DevOps or developer and operations teams are. So it's very siloed. And the tools that these teams use are in the same category as well. We can go to the next slide.
So I really want to take a step back and just talk from a security perspective. What is one of our biggest challenges in the security industry? It's that we've got a million different use cases and a million different tools to go and solve those use cases. So, we're asking security teams to to focus on endpoint security for their employee laptops. We're asking them to go and understand infrastructure as code scanning, and how do I work with my DevOps team to make sure that the Terraform templates that they're building are secure and they're not pushing public S3 buckets or open databases or something like that. And then we're also asking them to understand posture management and security groups and the configuration of assets and IAM roles and things like that. All while we're not, historically, we haven't been sharing this data back with the teams that are actually responsible for the building and ownership of that infrastructure. And so, not only do we have that problem, we then also have the problem where security teams have been buying individual tools for individual use cases. So every security team that I talk to has, they have a SIEM, and then they have another tool for posture management, and then they have another vulnerability tool for like their host vulnerabilities, and then often they'll have like another tool for application or code vulnerabilities. Sometimes that tool is shared, and then they'll be talking to me about like, hey, our DevOps team, they've been using Terraform for the last year or two, right? They're building and deploying resources faster than ever. We can't now be scanning them on a daily basis because by the time we realize that S3 bucket is public and we've gone and changed it, they've gone and pushed another Terraform template who's put it back to the way that it was, and now we've got to do it all over again. And so we've been asking security teams to work out of 10, 15, 20 different tools, all while we're not sharing that data back with the teams that actually can have a positive impact earlier in the life cycle that we were talking about. And so, when we were really thinking about, how do we go and build a really, positive and scalable security program with our customers, it was all about how do we go and move some of these tooling requirements together. And if you go and poll security leaders across industries, you'll see that 87% of security leaders are looking to consolidate multiple technologies into a single platform. And if we look at the last slide, it's obvious why, right? We cannot have security folks logging into a dozen different platforms on a daily basis, trying to communicate that data effectively back to their counterparts in DevOps to go and make changes. And so, about a year ago, when we were really thinking about how do we build this out on top of Datadog, how do we deliver good security outcomes for our clients, we looked at this sort of landscape and we said, okay, Datadog can meet about half of the security use cases that we're really interested in. And so that's a really good place where we can go and work with our customers. We can move their posture management, we can move their SIEM, we can move some vulnerability data in, we can do some workload protection, we can get that all in one place. That's a really good building block for us to build off of. Yeah, we'll still need to go and find other solutions for infrastructure as code scanning and code vulnerabilities and stuff like that. But when you partner with Datadog, one of the things that you're partnering with is an organization that invests heavily in their product build out. And so in the second half of this year, we've seen the maturity of the product grow dramatically. And now we have a bunch more of the use cases that we've been talking about are landing here in Datadog. And so as we talk to our customers about how do we go and build a mature, scalable security program, not only do we care about the technology that we build on and how we build it, we also care about the tools and the people, but we also care about the future of that technology. And so we believe that, in order to go build an effective security platform, you really have to invest in companies that are investing in product. And so Datadog is a great example of a company that's been a great partner for us to invest with. Actually, Amber, do you want to mention anything about kind of future? Now we have a Datadog product person on. Any sneak peeks you can give us about product roadmap or where we're going with this?
Absolutely, I'm happy to do it. Yeah, so when we first started the product, our first offering was actually the SIEM. So we did a lot on the runtime threat detection side, developed a ton of content there, and we continue to develop content. We are growing to be able to do things like historical analysis. So that helps a lot with like threat simulation and testing your detections and being able to find threats that might have existed in your environment when when there is a new type of threat that's introduced. So that's one big area where we're investing on the SIEM. So a lot of UEBA and historical threat analysis. Overall, I would say the Datadog platform, it started out as like a runtime threat detection tool, but we are moving our focus also to capture what we can do at the build time. So again, making sure that we're catching threats before they make it to production. And so as a result of that, we are making investments into infrastructure as code scanning, which is going to be announced officially at AWS reInvent later this month. We are also doing a lot on the code vulnerability side. So building out our code analysis offering. So again, being able to look at vulnerabilities in the IDE and code implementation issues at the IDE level and giving the developers the confidence they need to like proactively improve their code. We are also at the DLP level, so looking at data security, DSPM, data loss prevention, things like that. So at a very high level, like again, bolstering what we're doing throughout the full SDLC, but focusing more on the build time in 2025.
Awesome. So we've spent a lot of time talking about how, historically these roles are individual roles and responsibilities. And we need everybody to come together and sort of share the data set, share the responsibility. I think it's a really important thing to think about practically and culturally, but there also has to be a sense of ownership, right? Who has to actually do what when the rubber meets the road? And so, development still needs to focus on, writing, maintaining, debugging code, building, the future of the application in terms of, what product do we deliver to our customers? How do we continue to go and push that forward? How do we continue to go and meet products, deadlines, and goals with agreements with customers? Ops needs to continue to focus on managing the actual underlying infrastructure and the tools required for development to go and ship that code faster. Security still needs to own the investigation and understanding of security incidents. That does not mean that they have to work completely alone, which I think has historically been one of the challenges with security moving into this new ecosystem. But we do still need to own our own investigations. And so I want to take a minute to talk a little bit about, how do we think about investigations here at RapDev? How do we prioritize what's what? And how do we go drive to successful outcomes with our partners in DevOps? And before we jump into exactly how we investigate, I want to take a minute to talk about the fundamental reality in terms of security is that breaches are a business. And so I think that's a really important thing for everybody to digest and take a second to think about. The vast majority of breaches are not done for fun and games, right? They are done for profit. These are organizations that are just like the companies that you and I work with or for every day. They have salespeople, they have BDRs, they have development organizations, they have people that go and actually execute. These are real companies, they're businesses, and their job is to drive for one of three outcomes typically. They want to steal compute. That's sort of the most common and simplest version that we see in the cloud. So this is your classic crypto mining example where somebody gains access to a role that has permissions to go and deploy EC2 instances, and they go stand up some sort of a Bitcoin miner or something like that, and they collect crypto for as long as you leave that service running. They just try and get as much as they can before you turn that compute off. Second outcome that they drive for, or second potential outcome they drive for, is to steal your data and sell it back to you. And so typically that's done through ransomware. So instead of exfiltrating your data, I'm just going to lock it and I'm going to hold the key, and you pay me and I'll give you the key. And you hope that key works, because it doesn't always, because the math isn't always done right. And then the third outcome is steal your data and sell it to others. So this is most typically seen with companies that hold credit card data, social security data, things that can have intrinsic, easy to transact value. But those are fundamentally the three things that organizations who run breaches are searching for. And so we want to think about that, think through those lenses whenever we run an investigation. And so we want to prioritize them into one of three outcomes upfront. There's three different categories. We need to first, we need to understand what's the risk exposure to the business. Is this a true breach? Is there critical business impact here? The second category is this a real security signal? Is this a real event? But maybe there was no material impact yet, or no capable material impact because of a compensating control, or because we got lucky, frankly. And then the third is this a relevant security signal that maybe requires tuning on our side in order to improve the signal to noise ratio or something like that. And so we'll start with the security risks in production. So whenever we look at something in production, these are the most critical business impacts, right? This is God's most expensive land, waterfront in Malibu falling into the ocean, right? And so when we see a real impact here, the first thing that we want to do is isolate that threat. So our job here is not to investigate right away. Our job is to quarantine. So if we see a real material breach that can prevent that can impact our uptime, or that could be the start of a ransomware attack or something like that, our first job is how do we go and take that service that's been impacted, that role that's been captured, and how do we go and isolate that? After we've done that isolation, then we can go and investigate. And so this is where time matters here. And so having data in the place that our operations folks, who ultimately have the ability to go and isolate on our behalf, having that data in a tool that they already know and understand and can dig into, so that they can go and help us drive to, okay, it's Amber's role that's been breached here. We need that role shut off, or it's that database that Brooke stood up the other day that has it's got test data in it, but maybe we weren't super careful about that test data, and it might actually have real social security numbers in it or something like that. We need the ops folks who have access to that data, so that they can go and shut off those services or quarantine those services and stand up replacements as quickly as possible. That second group that we were talking about, sorry, these are the most common events that we see on a day-to-day basis. These are the things that we see generally in pre-production environments. So these are, they're real security signals. This is, somebody on Amber's team went and stood up a new S3 bucket, and they didn't change the default security permission. It's public to the world, but there's no data in that bucket. So fundamentally, there's no critical risk to the business. There's no role attached to that bucket. There's nothing that we're really afraid of here other than the potential for them to then do something with that bucket internally, which then causes a risk, or externally, somebody to put data in that bucket that has concern. And so these are fundamentally lower risks to the business. And so we want to spend our time really understanding and investigating before we go and ask our partners to make changes, right? We don't want to go and be in DevOps here every single day, like, hey, you've got to go and do this thing. We don't want to nag. We want to understand. We want to deliver critical, investigative reports that tell us, like, here's what we saw, here's why it matters, here's how to change it. We want to deliver everything to them as completely and as simply as possible. And every investigation that we run, we need to, before we close that investigation internally, we need to understand that should inform our rule tuning. So if there was data that we then had to go and grab manually, we should go and automate that. If there was, if this was a false positive because of X, Y, or Z reason, we should go figure out how do we suppress those false positives without losing access to the underlying data that's important here. And then we need to take that data and we need to inform our rule tuning. We need to continually update our rules. We need to think about them like they're living, breathing organisms. We don't just deploy a rule set and leave it forever. We need to continuously tweak and change them. And then the last set of alerts that we see on a day-to-day basis are vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, things that we really need to figure out how we can move left as early as possible. How can we get this data into the tools that our DevOps team are using today? How do we make sure that there's a way for them to action on them before it makes it into our lab? So infrastructure as code scanning in the build pipeline is a super important tool that we can use at our disposal here. Code scanning, code vulnerability scanning in their CI/CD pipeline is another tool that we can use here. All things inside of the Datadog environment that we can bring in as security folks, that we can bring to our DevOps partners and say, if we can get this deployed, we can get this integrated, we can tune it right. It's going to fundamentally drive less investigations on our side, which means less shoulder tapping on your side, where we have to go and ask you to help us fix something or understand something. And so then we can, we take all the context that we have, we can prevent false positives and false negatives, we can drive towards a cleaner environment. And fundamentally, one of the primary objectives of a modern security team should be to reduce the amount of false positives and negatives. We should not be running investigations needlessly. We should be able to handle petabytes of data on a day-to-day basis, log data, with only a few heads. And the only way that we can do that is if we are effective partners and we are effective rule tuners who understand the data that we're working with.
I was on mute. Thanks, Ryan. So I always think of this quote when I'm talking to organizations about like their first foray into DevSecOps, or maybe it's their second one and the first time around it didn't go super well. It perfectly captures the approach you need when you're going into a complex environment and trying to figure out simultaneously, like, how do you make life better for your developers? How do you make life better for your operations folks, so your SREs, your DevOps engineers? And ultimately, how do you make that all bubble up and tie into what the security team needs to do? It's really easy to try and do everything at once. I talk to a lot of organizations and they're basically like, tell me what tools I need to buy, tell me what processes I need to do or create to get to a good end state. I'm like, if you try to do everything at once, you're gonna get overwhelmed and maybe end up in a worse state. So the idea here is to kind of show you like all the different components there are at play. I always say that, you can always find one meaningful action or one meaningful improvement you can make, but it's all about kind of looking at things from like the high level view and trying to pick the easiest battle. You can have like an unlimited budget, the best budget in the world, but all of this needs a good culture and a good process to work first. So yeah, I'll let Ryan show the next slide and maybe talk through that.
I know we only have a couple of minutes left, so we're gonna try and accelerate through the end here because I'd love to get a couple of questions from folks who have stayed on with us for this long. But I think it's really important to take a step back and just understand, what are the data sources that we're actually talking about here. And so, we like to think of things in groups of three, and so we want to think about our log sources as, how do we start? We want to start with cloud infrastructure log and config. So what do we have deployed out there in AWS, Azure, GCP, and what's it doing on an operational basis? Second data source is all of our compute sources. So there are hundreds of these, obviously, but these are our EC2 instances, our Docker containers, our Kubernetes clusters, our data warehouses, all the compute layer that we may have. We want to get as much of that log data into our cloud SIEM as well, and then we'll have all this other security tooling that we want to bring in. So like Amber was saying, right? I'm never going to approach an organization and say, hey, we're going to rip out all of your existing security tooling. We're going to put a bunch of Datadog stuff in place, and that project is going to take 90 days, and it'll be good, because it will never happen like that. So it's how do we bite off what we can chew today, with a plan going forward to migrate the use cases that make sense into a singular platform, so that we can all work off of the same sheet. And so, Datadog has a huge library of integrations that they've built. We have, as RapDev, have also built dozens and actually hundreds of integrations for our clients as well. So if there's a tool that maybe Datadog doesn't natively support, we will be able to get that data out and into Datadog so that we can leverage that in the SIEM as well. And then we have a managed security operations center we're working with a lot of our customers on now, which is really helping security teams meet their DevOps counterparts in the real world. So where the rubber actually meets the road, we have a managed 24/7 security operations center that will integrate into your existing Datadog deployment. So this is a co-managed service. This is not our Datadog deployment. This is your Datadog deployment, where our SOC will go and ingest all the alerts. We'll investigate, we'll report. We operate that 24/7, and we'll understand, what happened, who did it, how it happened, the blast radius, any other services that were affected, and then how to go and remediate it. We'll reply to your teams. We'll integrate directly into the tooling that you're using for ticketing or communication. We'll integrate directly into your DevOps teams to say, hey, here's what needs to be fixed now. Here's how to fix it. And that's for the stuff that actually is living in the wild. While we're doing that, we'll also work with both your security, your ops, and your development teams on integrating security earlier into the lifecycle of software development, so that we can see, a maturity growth over time, less and less events, less and less investigations, ultimately, a better outcome for everybody here. This is a co-managed solution, like I was saying, and we own the ongoing management of the solution. So allow us to step in as the Datadog security experts and the Datadog experts to integrate directly with your DevOps and your security teams, but you can still maintain the control and licensing of the software. So we work with a lot of companies that plan to they'll work with us for 3 years, and then their DevOps and security teams will have built their own SOC, and they're going to take over the licensing from then on. That's totally fine. That's exactly what this program and platform is for. This is a way for us to go and help organizations mature from where they are today to where they could be. And then we have a suite of professional services engagements as well, where we can go and help migrate your tooling, get everything in here and functional so that teams can move forward. We have guaranteed SLAs for investigations, reporting, integration, rule tuning, and improvements. Everything that we've talked about, this is how we built the SOC. We have been in the shoes of customers, and we built this exactly how we built those security teams in order to integrate well with the DevOps folks inside of our organizations. I think without belaboring the point anymore, we'd love to take a few minutes to answer any questions that anybody has. So Brooke, I don't know if you've got any questions, we'd love to hear them.
Yes. All right. I have one in the chat here. What are good KPIs to measure a successful DevSecOps program?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple, and again, I always say start small or focus in specific areas. One thing that I heard from a customer of mine, they're really early in their DevSecOps journey, was they decided to just focus on how long it takes to resolve critical vulnerabilities and also like percentage of vulnerabilities that are resolved. So like they set a baseline, what the current baseline was, and they were like, okay, we just want to improve this by 15%, and these are the changes we're going to make to get there. I also believe in security KPIs for engineering teams, right? And like one of the ones that I actually used to follow is automated security test coverage. So whatever tool you're using, or whichever process you want to follow to build in that automation, it's basically looking at how much of your critical services, and you can just focus on production and say, hey, X amount of production has these automated security tests for it. We want to cover XYZ next quarter. You can do it by number of services. You can look at it by percentage, but really making sure you have the way to measure that top level view, and like figuring out what a reasonable amount of percent or number of tests or services is to move that needle forward. Ryan, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that's really important. I mean, some specific security KPIs that we always want to measure are, time to investigation start, total investigation time. But I think a really important one that we can drive with our DevOps counterpart is also time to remediation or time to fix. And if we have an important, if we measure that and we believe that that's important, it's a really good way for security teams to go and drive some shift left measures and say, look, we're averaging 14 days to fix right now. If we integrate this stuff into the build process, we're gonna, everything that's caught in the build process is going to be 0 minutes. So that'll help drive that average down a lot.
Awesome. Thank you. Anyone else, please feel free to input questions. Let's see, we have one more. What are the best prioritizations recommended to tackle equally critical prod events?
That's a super interesting question. So I'm going to interpret it in one way. If I'm wrong, just shoot another message and let's talk again. So I think the question relates to, if we have 2 active security incidents that are happening simultaneously, how do we prioritize what to work on first, or how do we prioritize what to quarantine first? I don't think there's any right answer here. The way that I would think about it would be, what's the one that we understand better? And then I would decide based on my understanding of that event, whether that was the one to attack or the other one. Because if I understand that the total risk scope here is, our DNS may go down, for example, that will kill all my internal services, nothing's going to work. That's, from a business impact perspective, that is incredibly critical. If I'm a online retailer, the website will be down, there will be no shopping, there'll be no purchasing. I can measure the impact of that event in dollars very easily, and I bet my executives are going to be able to measure that and come back to me with that data, and they're going to be upset about it. Versus if the other event is, we have a role with access to a database, and it looks like there's a data exfiltration event in place. Obviously, that's also a very critical event, but without knowing the data that they're actually exfiltrating offhand, I would prioritize the business impact one and then take on the business impact one as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Ryan. Let's take one more question and then we'll close out. While Ryan is answering this, please pull out your phone, scan the QR codes here to see the State of DevSecOps report, as well as how to get in touch with RapDev. So last question we have, any best practices, documents, links to refer for my team who weren't able to attend today? So any kind of resources that we can share.
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead, Amber.
Oh, okay. I think the best one is the State of the DevSecOps report. So that's actually compiled by our amazing security research and advocacy team. We have a blog as well called Datadog Security Labs. That connects you to, you don't need to be a Datadog customer to find value out of it. We publish context on emerging threats and vulnerabilities, open source tooling that can help you do things like better automate your security workflows, or better integrate with our threat simulation capabilities, which are free through our open source tooling offering. We also have the Datadog Monitor. It's our blog, it's our product blog. It contextualizes a bit on how you can use our products to get to your specific security KPIs, or to address things like zero trust and specific compliance frameworks. So a lot of good context out there. One other shameless plug. So our head of security research, his name is Zach Allen. He has a Detection Engineering Weekly. So if you're in the business of writing threat detections and security rules, his newsletter is amazing. And you can just look that up. It's just called Detection Engineering Weekly. But yeah, Ryan, I don't know if you have anything you want to plug too.
No, I think that's great. The State of the DevSecOps report. We have some resources on our website as well. And we would be happy to hop on a call with anybody to chat through this again. Talk through what we've seen a lot of security migrations. We've seen a lot of platform migrations. We work with, again, some of the largest scale customers in the world on Datadog, and we also work with plenty of the small ones as well. So we have solutions for everybody. So we would love to just get introduced and chat, and if we can help, we're happy to help, and if we can just provide good advice, we'll do that as well.
Awesome. Okay, thank you so much, Ryan and Amber. Thank you everyone for joining. It was great to have you. Again, scan those QR codes and we hope to hear from you soon. Thanks, everyone.